Hey, good morning, everyone. And look at this. The show is working. Sorry about yesterday. We had some website issues, as you might know. We were doing some updates, and the site just didn't work. Sorry about that, folks. We are working now, though, and that's what matters. We'll be showing actually yesterday's episode, the nighttime one, after the show today because we did not air it last night, but we did to film it. So stay tuned for that also, and you can watch yesterday's episode, which has not yet aired. So I guess that means it's also today's episode, right? That said, let's talk about what's happening with climate change because guess what's going on with the globalists? They want a global tax, meaning you'll pay your federal tax, you'll pay your state tax, and you'll pay your globalist tax. You'll pay your United Nations tax or whatever organization they decide to set up to help fight climate change and racial inequality and poverty as well while you're at it. Let me show you this. Zero Hedge has it. It says the ever growing demands for trillions of dollars per year to fight climate change. If it's trillions, by the way, that means it's probably going to be like America, Canada, and Western Europe bankrolling the entire world through our taxes. But let me show you. Not that we don't already. It says heads of state, in a lot of areas at least, heads of state and various organizations gathered in Europe for the past 2 days for climate change summits. The WF meeting is happening as well, by the way. I'll talk about that later today. Say, let's discuss the demands. This is what the globalist climate change activists are demanding for all of us. Now, they're demanding a lot of things, as you might suspect. But I want to highlight one important point, which says here an expert under the auspice of the United Nations estimates that investments have to reach the order of $1 trillion per year until 2030 to respond to the climate and biodiversity crisis. Oxfam estimates that $3.9 trillion per year will be needed over the same time period to fight poverty, inequality, and climate change. The World Bank estimates it would take $4 trillion per year to build the infrastructure for this. The cost of this easy to make, it's easy to make. We just need like $5-6 trillion. Actually, more than that. The cost of this easy to make vision is $1 trillion per year for the biodiversity crisis, plus $3.9 trillion per year to fight poverty and inequality, plus $4 trillion per year for the infrastructure. That's a mere $8.9 million per year until 2030. I think they mean trillion. $8.9 trillion per year, which is a 7-year cost of $62.3 trillion. Now, you might be wondering where that money could come from. Luckily, they have a solution. It comes from you, from your money, from your tax dollars, because we all know that people just have all this extra money laying around, and the wealthy are not paying their fair share. And I hate to break it to y'all, folks, but if you look at the entire world and the spectrum of inequality, well, unfortunately, the wealthy few happen to be in America and in Eastern Europe and in Canada, and a lot of the other world lives in poverty. And so, even if you're like medium income, you're actually among the wealthy class if you look at the entire world. And so, they need to create new tax collectors in order to collect $62.3 trillion over the next 7 years. And unfortunately, I believe that most of us will be will be the targeted sources for that. Let me show you this. I'm half joking, but it's actually serious. They want to do this. Ironically, the saving grace that we're not currently paying for this is that Republicans have the House of Representatives, and they're the only thing standing between us and this. They're the 300 at Thermopylae against the globalist hordes trying to take $62.3 trillion from us. But it says here, Euro intelligence notes that G7 countries considered reallocating $100 billion in special drawing rights to developing countries, but the measure is still blocked in the Euro area. And they say developed countries, meaning America and Eastern Europe, Western Europe. Canada, and a handful of other countries. Developed countries also pledged 0. Remember, even China, they call themselves a developing country. They intentionally do not include themselves on that label because it means they get money and they don't have to pay certain amounts of money to the internationalist systems. Developed countries also pledged 0.7% of their wealth in support. Now, where does that wealth come from? Where does 0.7 of the wealth in developed countries come from? That's taxpayer dollars. That is your money. Their wealth is your taxes. You getting that? It says, though the funds were only partially released. Remember, that's the way that whole COVID bailout worked. Remember where they said, we need to make sure that Americans are being supported while they undergo the stress of COVID-19 and lockdowns. And then they passed that and they sent us like, what was it, like $300 or maybe not even that, like checks. And then they sent all of our money all around the world to the stupidest programs you can imagine. I think they built not even joking, they built like a camel statue in one of the Arab countries. They were investing in like fish research, gender studies in like Pakistan, all kinds of crazy stuff like that. That was your tax dollars hard at work. We're trillions of dollars in debt, paying more money in interest than our entire defense budget every single year, meaning that money is only going to the banks. The banks are getting rich off it. You're just paying them interest because they wanted to send our money all around the world. But they say there will be discussions about new sources of financing like new taxes. And that's real, folks. This is an exact quote, according to the World Bank, right? According to this quote here, there will be discussions about new sources of financing like new taxes. And it says ahead of the summit, the only consensus that could emerge is a tax on maritime transport that could yield $60 to $80 billion per year, according to the World Bank. $60 to $80 billion per year, by the way, that's a lot of money, and that would mean increased costs of goods because of increased costs of shipments. But I should note that is absolutely not the $8.9 trillion per year they would need to raise through other means. Who knows? Maybe every Western country, every developed country, will have accounting errors suddenly, and they'll be like, "Oh, an accounting error. We've uncovered $8.9 trillion. Lo and behold." Like, I'm half joking because that's what the Defense Department did with Ukraine, by the way, or the Defense Department did with Ukraine. They're like, "Oh, oops, accounting error. Look at all this money we found. Time to send it to Ukraine." Maybe they'll deal with this too, but we'll have to see. So anyways, yeah, folks, the way they want to have it, federal tax, state tax, who knows what the tax, well, I guess income tax counts as that, sales tax, tax on everything, every transfer of money. And in addition to that, you'll have your globalist tax to support the internationalists trying to govern our lives. Anyways, again, it's not happening currently, mainly because Republicans are blocking it. The Biden administration does seem to be on board with it. Democrats do seem to be on board with it. Republicans do not. And also in Europe, where you have a relative conservative shift taking place in a lot of countries, at the very least, strong enough to create kind of a bastion against the really woke policies being pushed in a lot of those countries. They're also resisting it. So the chances of this happening, at least currently, are not there. Maybe a handful of countries could throw in a little bit, but look, those countries don't chip in much anyways. If you look at how much they put into like NATO or how much they put into the United Nations, typically they look to the U.S. to bankroll these things. Americans are the sugar daddies of the world. Americans are the sugar daddies of the world. Everybody looks to shake us down for more money. But luckily, we're not paying this just yet. That being said, there's another government regulation in the works. Now, they've regulated just about everything. Your right to own firearms, which shall not be infringed, but is being infringed. Your right to free speech is being infringed through a public-private partnership. And now, very soon, even your freedom to think may just be infringed. I should note, I don't think the Constitution protects freedom of thought, because nobody ever thought that you could regulate thinking, but apparently that's on the list. Exposed, it says, this is a good Substack blog, by the way, secret government effort to regulate your mind. Now, technically, this is an extension of, what they're doing against, what they say, misinformation and disinformation. There's a new one beyond misinformation and disinformation that is actually written into American some of the documents for different branches of government, monitoring for misinformation and disinformation, and the different programs and funds they have for this. These are actual programs. Beyond misinformation and disinformation, they have what they call malinformation, malicious information. Information that can be considered true. You can make absolutely true statements, but it is deemed malicious and therefore is being censored. Now, the problem with malicious information, malinformation, is that it's not lies. It's not untrue statements. It's not like you're saying something that's not real. You're saying something that somebody finds offensive, and because of that, it's deemed malicious. Another word for this being used in Europe right now is hate speech. And so they actually have laws being rolled out right now to restrict hate speech. And part of these laws including United Nations organizations, which we'll talk about them. I talked about on the show last night. We had Alex Newman on, but I'll show you that in a bit. The United Nations, as we speak, is trying to regulate hate speech, and that includes even proposals to fine or punish, arrest even students in schools for engaging in hate speech. And they want to regulate these types of things, restrict these types of things in order to change the mindsets of the populations. It says here, one of the big questions that those of us involved in exposing these secret U.S. government censorship efforts have been asking ourselves the last few months is, did the people involved know that they were breaking the law? That question appears to have been answered with the resounding yes by the House Judiciary Committee. Yesterday, it released a report, The Weaponization of CISA, C-I-S-A, how a cybersecurity agency colluded with big tech and disinformation partners to censor Americans on government censorship. And they state, this is according to former Assistant General Counsel for the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, in an email to a colleague, quote, "It's only a matter of time before someone realizes we exist and starts asking about our work." What are we going to realize exists, and what is their work, and why is this CIA top-level official so concerned the public might figure it out? Well, it says here, the we in that sentence refers to the network of government agencies and non-governmental organizations, public-private partnership, just like the Nazis, that we and others have dubbed the censorship industrial complex. That complex includes the University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public. Because who doesn't want to be informed? Its leader, Kate Starbird, responded to the former CIA official, that's Susan Spalding, by saying, "Yes, I agree. We have a couple of pretty obvious vulnerabilities." It says, but later that day, Starbird dismissed the notion that she and her colleagues were doing anything wrong. The real problem was, she explained, that, quote, current public discourse is part of a result of information operations, seems to accept malinformation as speech, and within democratic norms, and that CISA, C-I-S-A, may face bad faith criticism for its censorship. What you're witnessing here is a public-private partnership. The federal government cannot legally censor you. The federal government cannot legally, mitigate the types of discussions we're having. They can monitor communications. They can monitor the internet to some extent. Debatable under the Fourth Amendment, by the way. They can check these things because they're looking for foreign threats or terroristic threats, and that is the narrative that gives them the legal backing in order to be able to do it, thanks to things like the Patriot Act and thanks to other programs, for example, monitoring for Russian disinformation. But because you have these programs in place, they can flag things and then through a public-private partnership ask a private company to censor it for them. using the free market or even financing these companies, interestingly, through taxpayer money. Financing these companies and these operations using taxpayer dollars in order to do what they cannot legally do. Public-private partnership. Remember, even Twitter, and Facebook, there was examples of federal agencies paying the people they were asking to censor content. And that does raise the questions of whether it's a hand-in-glove type scenario, of whether, for example, a private company operating with federal government money is by extension carrying out government operations and is therefore violating the First Amendment as well. But these programs are not just about censorship. They're about regulation of information. And that goes beyond just, of course, normal censorship. This is the control of thought, of public discourse and thought. That said, folks, let's jump over to Epoch TV exclusively. I'm going to be showing you yesterday's live Q&A and episodes as well today. We had internet issues yesterday, and so our episodes did not go up. Those of you on Epoch TV probably did not see them. So we will be posting those on Epoch TV today, so stay tuned for that. I'll also show you, of course, last night's episode, and of course we want to do a Q&A now. So jump over to Epoch TV. Those of you on YouTube, come join us there, and we'll go into questions. Let's see here. See more butts, you're saying. When I lived in Kentucky, worst year of my life, I had to pay income taxes to the district, city, county, state,